Sorry for the delay. And this is the June 3rd, 2019 meeting of the Radnor Planning Commission. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the nation for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda is the minutes of the May 6, 2019 meeting. Are there any changes, additions to be made to the minutes? I don't hear anything. Can I have a motion?
No, I move we accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next is the petition from the Hampshire Family Partnership amending Chapter 280 of the Radnor Township zoning ordinance by establishing regulations for allowing rooftop dining within the Wayne Business Overlay District.
Evening, Nick Cornelia, representing Hampshire Family Partnership on this. I believe all of you have seen the proposed amendment. This was before the Board of Commissioners, their last meeting. They recommended that it come forward to you for your comments. There's there's one particular item that I will point out. There's an error in the proposed regulations. I put in 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., which is, of course, only 4 hours. And, of course, that was meant to be 8 a.m. to 12 a.m., so because obviously the rooftop dining will be there in the evening as well. So I would like to...
I would even suggest that to avoid any confusion, it be midnight.
That's fine.
There's no question about it.
But as you see in the petition, the purpose of this, as we all know, as you look around the surrounding areas, so there's been a lot of development with business and in particular restaurant uses in areas such as the Valley Forge Town Center now, Conshohocken, Phoenixville, Bryn Mawr, Ardmore, now up the line in Berwyn, Media. And so there's a lot of competition among businesses for this type of setting that we're talking about. And actually, this setting has already been done in Conshohocken, and we do by the Great American Pub, the owners, and we do have some photos showing that. Just a little background, I believe the Great American Pub's probably been in Wayne for, they said 17 years, it seems longer. It is owned by the Hampshires, they're a Rosemont family, all of them went to Radnor, they've been in the community for years and years and years. I used to own what was then the Wild Horse P. Jerky's in Garrett Hill. And they actually moved out of Radnor for a short period of time and then decided they had to move back in because this is where the start was and this is where they were from. They have done this in Conshohocken. I don't know if any of you have been at the rooftop dining that they have in Conshohocken. We have some photographs here that you can see. This is the location itself, and you can see from street level, you barely notice that it exists. And this is what it looks like. You have photographs here showing what it appears to be currently, and it'd be very similar to what we're proposing as well. And of course, this is
Just right on Fayette Street?
Yes. And what we're proposing here is not just limited to this site, obviously, is to the Wayne Business Overlay District itself. And we'll go through the ordinance, and I'm sure you have many comments already. But, as you can see in the ordinance, we have added some restrictions, particularly to preserve the surrounding residential areas from any disturbance, if any, that there could be. The next photo here, there are some photos actually of what it looks like at night, and you can see by those top photos, it's basically string lights is what they have out there. And of course, And you'll see there, it's, the area obviously has been redeveloped, that top roof. And similar to Conshohocken, some of the places in Wayne actually have flat roofs as well, which this would be appropriate for. But there's a great expense involved here. Obviously, there's a lot of fortifications involved. I believe the entire project is probably in the area of $500,000 when all is said and done. We do have a letter from a structural engineer to this particular site saying it can be done, but of course it has to be fortified and certain buttresses and everything has to be established in order for it to be successful. It has to be ADA accessible. It will have its own laboratories, so people would not have to come down. It would certainly be, since it has to be ADA accessible, it has to be accessible by elevator, which is what they have in Conshohocken as well. It would have to comply with all rules and regulations, permitting requirements of the township and of building codes and anything else, certainly for safety purposes. The idea, and we did speak to the head of the Wayne Business Association, and he thought it was a great idea to move forward with. And as we said, we're limiting it to the Wayne Business Overlay District itself. As many of you know, there are some flat roof areas that would probably be appropriate for this type of development along North Wayne Avenue in particular. Looking at the ordinance itself, there's several comments that we would like to make, and I'm sure all of you have read what is being proposed. We're limiting it to the Wayne Business Overlay District. We're limiting it to only where a restaurant is located. It can't be located if there's a residential use in the building. We have excluded it from the amendment. It would be limited to a period of use from March 1st to November 30th, which I believe is kind of consistent with the overlay district itself and the outdoor dining. We have limited to the hours of operation, and as I mentioned, you know, we're talking about midnight rather than 12 p.m. We put in safeguards, and it can be located no closer to residential areas. We put in safeguards regarding that it cannot be extended beyond the existing building itself. And certainly what is probably of most importance here is parking. And what we provided here is that you must have valet parking if you're going to use this service. And in addition, there's two lots. If you ever go into Wayne on a Friday or Saturday night and drive in, there's two lots that are basically empty. The one lot is a lot across the street from the White Dog, which we've always kind of referred to as the AT&T lot, which is metered parking by the township. And the other lot is the South Wayne lot down across from the middle school. And that's basically where they would valet park. And depending on the number of seats, they would have to rent so many spaces from the township. And currently, I know the fee that the township has in their code is $75 per parking space if you're going to rent a space from the township during this usage. But again, if you're in Wayne, you know those lots are really not used. Even during peak times, there's very limited use of those lots. So that's basically the gist of the ordinance. Certainly, we'd would look forward to your comments regarding it, and certainly I can discuss it in more depth if you wish as well. But perhaps it'd be time to hear from you people as to comments, thoughts, ideas, good idea, bad idea, or
I have a question for you. I noticed that there's some coverings on the roofs. I know they're more of a tarp or an awning. What is the code? I didn't really see anything written in here about what's going to be allowed to cover people, especially because of the rain and snow that we can get even inside that time period. I know there's restrictions on how high we can have parapets and rooftops. What is the limitation going to be on adding structure on top of it for covering, including awnings?
Well, the purpose of it obviously is to keep it open air. Currently, obviously you would have the height restriction whenever the height restriction is in the zoning district. I know that the outdoor dining ordinance does provide some covering limitations, and I believe really they were talking more about the umbrella type things, and certainly we can incorporate that type of thing in it as well. And I don't know if what you're doing in Conshohocken now, perhaps you want to come up, Nick, and maybe you can address it better than I can.
Nick?
You're going to have to talk into the microphone.
Nick, where is it in the ordinance for dining? Instead of me hunting through it, is there, you said there's specific verbiage about outdoor
In the
dining?
WBOD?
Is that where it is?
Well, it would be
Not-
in the
no,
outdoor
I-
dining is 280-115.4 is the outdoor dining regulations. And remember, that really deals with, your sidewalk outdoor dining. But Nick, you have to speak into the microphone too, okay?
You're
And-
talking about canopies.
If you can introduce yourself.
Oh, my name is Nick Pateg. I'm the architect on the project. And I want to mention that the canopies that you're asking about is basically like umbrellas. They're movable. They're taken down during the off-season for sure, and basically cover for people who don't want to be under direct sun. At this location also, I must say that the adjacent building is at least a 3-story building. And the pub itself is only a 1-story building. So we're only adding, just enough decking and railing material, and of course the awnings that are movable. So we're not going to be anywhere near the adjacent building height.
For you, but if the code didn't say anything about it, I wonder if you all had talked about what the code was going to put limitations on, because there are structures that could be 3 stories that maybe their parapets or their cornices are already at the max, which I need to look at what the max is. But will there be some restrictions? In other words, you can put a roof or awning up if you are exceeding 1 or 2 stories or something like that. I just didn't know if you've gotten there yet with this.
We haven't gotten to that point yet. This has been vetted to some extent by township staff. I don't know to what extent it has been. Basically said, go ahead, submit it, but they did, I know they looked at it, so.
One of the concerns I had when I read this over, and again, we're having a general conversation about all this, is whether or not our building code and fire codes are written in a fashion to anticipate this type of a use. The thought occurred to me that, and I'm sure the architect can discuss this, how do you accommodate not just handicapped access, but emergency escape routes, especially for handicapped people? That's
Yeah,
one concern that I had when I read this over. Another one is, obviously on a built-up roof or a flat roof, you have to put some sort of a flooring down, something people can walk on. Again, how does the fire code, what does the fire chief think about that? I mean, oftentimes, especially in a building like the American Pub, if there is a fire, I think one of the first things the firemen do is they get up on the roof, they tear the roof open so they can pour water down inside the place. So, how do you handle those aspects? I'm not necessarily saying that you need to answer those questions right now, but I think they're legitimate questions that will have to be answered in terms of safety, fire, ingress, egress, those sorts of things. An elevator is one solution, but in case of a fire, the elevator's shut off. At least that's my understanding. Maybe it doesn't happen on simply a 2-story
Yeah,
building.
but Reiner, like all building
I
codes,
think your architect wants
yeah,
to say
sure.
something.
But Reiner, like all building codes, fall under the International Building Code.
Right.
Which have all those provisions in them, but I'll let
If they've
the-
been adopted, they don't necessarily adopt every aspect of it,
Now, Reiner's adopted all of it.
all of it, okay.
Yeah, the International Building Code stipulates, based on occupancy, how many means of egresses you have to have. And at this location, with the number of people we expect to have, there's 2 means of egress and opposite of each other. So if anywhere there's a fire, there's always another means of getting off that roof deck area. It's
Well,
only
how about the deck? What's the deck comprised of?
the decking material is built over a roof, and it's a fire-resistant decking material, similar to what you've seen in some of these pictures. That's approved,
Can you tell us what that material is? I mean, because we can't really see those pictures.
It's
as
a
Going to be the wood EPA deck.
Chuck, you gotta come up.
Yeah.
Chuck Hempshire Jr. The deck that we're using in Conshohocken is almost, the rollout material is fire rated. And it's actually, we can put everything right on top of it. The only thing that you can't, I guess the weight, it's not the, there's no smoking. So if there was a fire, you can cut right through it like you would cut through a regular roof for the firemen to get in and put the water in to put a fire out.
Okay.
It would happen right away.
In the outdoor dining, there is a section called roof coverings in 115.45. Okay, if you read that, it says roof covering at the discretion of township health officers. All outdoor dining areas shall have an approved roof material available for patrons. No advertisement on umbrellas shall be permitted. Fire-resistant materials shall be used. If awnings are used, they shall be a minimum of 6 feet 8 inches in height above the sidewalks, which would be the roof surface or patio surface. And tents shall not be permitted over the outdoor dining area. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah,
In
we
other
would
words,
have no
you basically
problem.
want to comply with
Right.
what outdoor dining is, but you want to add roof, and this specifically talks about sidewalks.
Right.
So in essence, that's what you want to do.
Yeah, and yeah, we would have no problem with those type of coverings, you know.
And it would not be, this seems to be that it's not a permanent, is that correct, Mary? They're kind of talking, and this was, it's not a permanent structure. There won't be any permanent structures available up there.
Yeah.
Sorry, saw the same regulation, and I wasn't sure why no tent over, why the,
Well, I think they don't want to put like a tent where with sides down, so that it's an enclosure.
Understood.
It's just a covering for sun and rain.
Yeah,
And
what-
again, if the weather's foul, no one's going to be on the roof or on the sidewalk anyhow.
Yeah, what you see in Wayne now on the sidewalk dining areas are basically the umbrella-type tents over the tables that do protect them from sun. As they mentioned, it's really from sun more than from elements because really no one eats outside when it's raining. I mean, the actual pub does have a covering over it, but I think all the other areas in Wayne do not have any type of covering for their outdoor dining. They just have the umbrellas that you can use for protection.
I think I would add to your thing is that no permanent structure be permitted up there. I think that whatever kind of a covering that you would have has to be something that goes away come November and doesn't go up until March, and it has to be a canvas kind of non-fire kind of thing, not something that's permanent. That's the way I would look at it.
That's certainly the intent.
Maybe I misunderstood something that you said, Nick, but I just wanted to understand this. Other buildings that may have a flat roof, like I think Ard, I think that's how you say the restaurant, the one across the street.
Ardé.
Ardé. That has a flat roof, if I'm not mistaken, but there's another story, and I don't know what's in there above that. Now, would
At
that
one
qualify
time,
under this ordinance?
Under one time, I know it was a residence. I don't think it's a residence anymore. There was an apartment there.
Yes.
So yes, our day possibly could qualify.
Even though there's a story in between the restaurant area and where the roof is.
As the way the ordinance is written, it would be, I think right now they're using that for an office.
Oh, I'm not
You know,
really
office for the
concerned what they're
restaurant
using it
use.
for,
So
other
I'm
than if
just
it's
saying
not
this is-
residential. If it's not residential, I guess
Right. Right.
that's fine. But let's assume it's an office, or they're just using it for storage. The mere fact that there's a story in between where the
Correct.
restaurant is and the roof level would not be excluded as a result of the
That's
ordinance.
correct.
Okay.
They would still need to have access for handicap, so they would have to probably run the elevator through it to get up.
I have a question for our council. If valet parking or offering valet parking was a precondition to a rooftop restaurant, is that something that's enforceable by ordinance?
it's enforceable, you can't require people to use valet parking. You don't have control, the permit doesn't have control over the patrons who might use the facility. I think what I would recommend that you look for is the availability of parking spaces for those who choose to use valet. If they can't find another place to park, just saying will valet, I think I don't know the second parking lot you talked about, but you'll have certain number of spaces in the municipal lot, and you'll be able to demonstrate that you're meeting your parking, a portion of your parking requirements with those spaces. But then I think there should be some contractual relationship with any place that they choose to park so that you know those parking spaces are nailed down. So that when people can't find parking on the street, they have another option other than parking illegally. But I think the question you're probably asking is, what about people who park other places and choose and then eliminate parking spaces for other businesses? Is that what you're concerned about?
Yes.
I don't see a way to compel people to use valet parking, says the woman who will never valet park her car.
I think
Just-
what, Mary, I think what has to happen is to say that there is free valet parking, okay, available if you choose, and that they need to make available the number of spaces, rent the number of spaces from the township at one of those other two lots, so that people know that it's available at other spaces, just like we do in most places where there's not enough parking
Well-
in some of the areas, that they rent spaces at other parking lots.
Make
We've
it-
done that. In
And that's
Garrett
what
Hill,
we
we've
provided
done
in
it a
the
lot.
ordinance. We provided that whatever parking that you don't meet on site, which of course throughout Wayne is none, you have to provide those spaces, make them available through the township lots, and you would basically contract with the township to make those spaces available.
Another
Because-
thing might be to have it, again, this is just a very free-ranging conversation, but I know in Philadelphia and South Philadelphia, it used to be they had a lot of individual valet parking. It was crazy. Now, there's certain parts along Passyunk Avenue where one valet services a whole bunch of restaurants. And maybe that's something that should be considered here, is instead of dueling valet parking services, everybody in the community, in the overlay district, gets together and says, we're going to have a valet parking, it's going to start here, and that's where they're going to go.
And there's nothing to prevent that. here.
Okay, I agree, I think that's the case, but again, you want to get away from having multiple parking services, try and focus on one parking service to serve, I mean, I can think of 3 places on North Wayne Avenue where this might work. Our Day, maybe the Matador, actually, Goat's Beard, I think, has got a
Yeah, I think
flat
Ghost
roof,
Beer
and then, of
has
course,
it.
Great American
I
Pub.
don't know. Christopher's is pretty high right now. I'm not certain where they are with height requirement.
But there's at least
And
3.
I don't think
or 4.
Christopher, talking to Chris, his building's not really appropriate
Right,
for it,
right.
just,
It does, but there's others, and the thought of having 3 separate valet services just doesn't, that's not going to do anybody any good. So it might be something that you want to consider. One other thing that occurred to me, I just wanted to mention before I forget, is regarding, there's something in the ordinance about adhering to lighting ordinances.
right.
I think it should be added that there will be no grandfathering. If we ever get around to having a comprehensive lighting ordinance, you have to comply with it. I
I'll
don't
have to
want,
think about language on that one, Mary. We'll have to, I don't know if Mary's listening. Yeah. Yeah, current, that's right, could just say maybe current, light, whatever they are. But again, you don't know what they're gonna be. That's the only danger of that, I guess.
What makes you say that? Sorry, why do you want everybody to have to comply with what's issued?
well, we have some issues in the township where, and I'm not going to get into naming names, but there's some places in the township where there's questions regarding the lighting.
We're
And
trying
if
to
we-
resolve that one, actually.
And if we ever get around to passing a comprehensive lighting ordinance, there is an issue as to whether or not some of the outfits that are grandfathered will take advantage of those. And of course, they happen to be a huge lighting source.
John, I think that'd be a real hard one to defend.
And that may be a hard one to contain, but you're looking at lighting regulations now. We haven't made a lot of progress in the last few months, but we have begun the process of looking at, so why not just incorporate them into this ordinance so that this use specifically says, lighting can't project further than the footprint of the rooftop dining and no glare spilling off.
I think that's a better way to handle it. But to say that whatever we do today is they can't keep that, I think that'd be a hard fight even for
We
you.
have actually
dealt with that in Conshohocken, that all the lighting is low voltage lighting, and it's directly in areas where people are walking,
Yeah,
not
we're
directly.
not necessarily saying yours, but we're just saying if we're gonna change the ordinance
Yeah.
relative to rooftop dining, what do we want it to say today that's gonna handle 10 days from today,
Right,
right?
okay.
And that's kind of what,
Well, what you don't
what
want
we're
to
looking
do
at.
is having a bright light
right?
obscuring or doing harm to other properties adjacent.
Sir,
and
did
so
you
on.
do that on your own initiative, or was that a Conshohocken regulation? But it's not in their ordinance, they suggested it? Okay. Hoping we could.
Yeah, because when you think about it, if you're going to be up at night eating on a rooftop, you don't want bright lights shining in your face anyway. It's going to be very low, dim lights to create an atmosphere.
Nick, I just had a few questions reading through the proposed ordinance. Are there going to be service bars? Are there going to be, is there going to be anything on the rooftop deck that's going to actually be where cooking is happening or drinks are being made?
There is, if you notice on one of these pictures, there's a very small, you see here, there's very small bar area with stools around it. So technically, yes, the intent would be for drinks to be made. I'm not certain if they've gotten as far as the food. I don't know if they would put a grill up there or certainly, most food probably be made in the kitchen.
Well, here's where I'm going.
Go ahead.
Okay, so if you have a bar up there, it's going to get loud because you're going to have TVs and you're going to have a bar, and that's going to be, to me, that's going to be something that you'd have to think about whether you want that up there. If you're going to prepare food up there, I wonder, could you franchise out this rooftop deck? In other words, I'll be really absurd here, but could there be a McDonald's up there? There's no language in here that says there can't be, and I don't think the intention here is for that to happen. But,
Yeah.
Look, you lose control of things when you start to franchise things out. So I'm just,
Hey, Matt, I would be opposed to any food preparation up there or any open flame because the potential fire problem with that would be monumental. And if I would to vote on this, I would say you can't do food prep up there. That would just be my personal opinion. I don't have a hard time with a bar, but I would not go for food prep.
well, I just think it has to be in the, whatever Nick and you guys decide should be in the ordinance and that before we decide whether we like it or not. So a couple other things. Main access to the rooftop is from the inside. Right, there's not going to be any outside access to the rooftop.
There's actually going to be
You got
the elevator that's going to be for patrons as well as for handicapped. And then also there will be 2 exterior stairs, open stairs.
For ingress and egress?
For egress and yeah. Okay, and of course for any kind of fire, those stairs are accessible to leave the roof deck.
No, what I was wondering was, could patrons from the street go in to
Yes.
the rooftop?
They
Okay.
should be able to come up.
Well, that language should be clear.
They should be able to come up.
That language should be clear here.
Okay.
Because I think people are going to want to know whether you're going to have access to the deck from only the inside or from the outside and
from-
inside. That's an
from,
important aspect, I think.
Exactly, from North Point Avenue as well as from the elevator that's inside.
Also an interior stair?
There's no interior stairs.
No.
The other, this is sort of an absurd,
All the food's going to come up and down in the elevator?
They may have the elevator as the waitress is using it, or a dumbwaiter. There are a couple of options that we haven't gone 100% through yet.
I mean, one other thing that I noticed, and I don't know if this language has to be in the ordinance, but it's in other ordinances about rooftop dining, no smoking. Now, that sounds stupid, but I don't think Wayne restaurants are 100% no smoking.
I think they are. I think LCB requires all no smoking. It's required by LCB.
Because on the township, in the township bulletins, it said 92% of the restaurants have have decided.
Really?
Yeah.
The LCB doesn't permit, if you have a liquor license, you can't smoke. The only ones that can smoke. Oh, is it amount of food you serve? Oh, okay. But we can put that in there. I don't
Right,
think
well,
there's
the
any. I didn't
reason- the
realize, I
reason
thought it
bring-
was.
The reason I bring it up, Nick, is it's outside. And, you know, it's like a rooftop,
Yeah.
and if somebody's gonna want to do that.
Yeah, I think that smoking thing is for like the neighborhood bars that don't sell a lot of food. But if you sell a percentage amount of food, which restaurants do, there's no smoking
Yeah,
permitted.
I don't think you, I mean, we can put it in there. Yeah, I'm sure you guys don't want it. Yeah, right, yeah, yeah.
Do you have a plan of the proposed rooftop?
We do have a plan.
You want to put that up here?
Sure.
I don't know which view.
This is
This
kind of
way or
what
the other
it,
way?
doesn't matter.
It's upside down.
Let's go the other way. Let him read it. This is kind of what,
This is a preliminary plan.
and so if you notice here, as I said, there, just like you saw in the picture here, there is a small bar area. We were kind of talking about this today, Chuck and I were, and saying there's a large preference now for people to eat at a bar. And I think part of it is you get to talk to people. I know that, you know, many times when we go out now, we'll want to sit at the bar just to be able to talk to people. So it's not just merely for drinking. And remember, this is not really, you know, it's not a college bar. It's not a partying bar. And no one in Wayne actually is a college bar or a partying bar. It's more food service itself. But there's a small bar area here. Here's the elevator, the mechanicals. You have ADA bathrooms, both men and women, of course. Now, he does have a cooking hood here, and, you know, it sounds like there may be a preference for not allowing cooking there. I believe that was supposed to be a grill.
They're self-contained.
Yeah, it's a self-contained oven, but again, if the township doesn't want that, I don't think it's a crucial issue here. And then here's the exits that you see, one from North Wayne, and then the emergency one is in the back of the building. If you know, here's North Wayne, I assume that, yeah, here's West, and in the back here, there's like a little area that is also owned by the Great American Pub, and that would be emergency exits there. So the main would be right on North Wayne for the stairways, and then, of course, the elevator from inside.
So for view shed purposes, we probably should write something in there that says that the bathrooms and the elevator shaft should be a certain distance from the front of the building, because otherwise you're going to change the view shed from North Wayne Avenue. So, right, that's in the back, that's fine. But when you're on the street, you don't want to see a bathroom and an elevator shaft pop up at the front of the building. So we probably, yours is fine, but I'm saying in general, when you're looking at row homes in the cities and you're looking at like city regulations for row homes, which is kind of like what that section of street is.
Sure.
There's a view shed, you have to be a certain number of feet back.
And actually,
I would be less concerned about them than the stairs coming up off the street. I think that's quite awkward, and I cannot imagine a streetscape with a lot of these stairs coming up.
yeah, if you, well, one, you're going to have to prevent, at least in regards to the Great American Pub, they own the property. It's not in the right-of-way. So the stairs would actually be on their property. You cannot put the stairs in any right-of-way. Like, for example, the sidewalks is a right-of-way, and you would not be able to put stairs in that location. And you would still also have to comply with any setback regulations there are in the township, in the WBOD, in order to construct stairs, because that is considered as part of the building. And just to remember, here's one of the views, and this is actually from pretty high up, and this looks like it's taken from across Fayette Street to the Great American Pub in Conshohocken with the rooftop dining.
So,
Restrooms up on the top of that?
Yes.
How far above, assuming the parapet with the fence is 42 inches, how high do those?
Are we in the air? 40 foot.
No, you're 40 feet in the air there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How high above the parapet would, or the parapet wall, would, do the restrooms extend?
There's a fence inside that exceeds it, 42 inches.
It adheres to the maximum height that's allowed by the Conshohocken codes. ordinances over there. So it's within the maximum height of any structure.
Oh, in Conshohocken.
From the-
Okay,
yeah,
Well, that
in
wasn't really
Conshohocken.
that wasn't my concern. I was just trying to picture these restroom facilities extending up and above the.
I get it. Let's put a max height, you know, even, it's not, obviously it can't exceed the WBOD height, but also above the roof, we can put a limitation on how high.
Yeah.
What's the maximum height for anything that's protruding?
Yeah.
Elevator shafts,
Yeah.
the elevator itself, and the bathrooms
Right.
will be probably,
And those steps that you mentioned on the front of the building, they would actually descend into that, kind of that patio area that you have with the, okay.
yes.
That's where the ice cream store used to be, right? All right.
But there-
But the-
Dairy Queen,
those,
right.
those steps have to be covered, correct?
I don't know, go ahead.
There can be open stairs since it's only used in season. You know, it's not, snow load and so on is not hindering that. So it's only used during the season that the, you know, and it's like a galvanized open stairs, so rain goes through it and so on.
So at the Conshohocken restaurant, how do you heat on the roof? Do you have any kind of heat?
Heat?
Okay, so you're not anticipating putting up like a propane-type heater or anything?
If people are cold, they go downstairs to eat.
No, understood, but, you know, if,
Shade sales don't allow it, so
what's that?
the shade sales won't allow it.
Mhm.
You can't have heat underneath them. They're not, they're fire rated, so.
Okay. I mean, that was another, you know, safety issue, if those, even if you're not planning to do it, if that should be prohibited from putting on roofs in general. Is there,
And while you're on that subject, how does the planning commission feel about, even if they're not putting it on in this ordinance, how does the planning commission feel about heaters on the roofs? Because there are regulations in the outdoor dining section for heaters and safety requirements. So if you're going to allow them, that's probably something we should know now so we can refer to those safety
I
regulations.
think that certainly we like the opinion of the fire chief, but to me, having a propane-fired heater up on the roof is asking for trouble.
We'll
Because
remove it.
you got
And
people
matter of fact,
fiddling
we're
with the
saying it's not
things and-
allowed.
It's not allowed in the state.
Well, there may be other things, but if it's going to be propane-fired, I wouldn't be really in favor of that if there's viable alternatives that don't rely on
We can just remove it. I don't think there's any intent to provide any type of heat source on the roof, and I have a feeling it may not even be allowed. But we can put that provision in the
Nick,
ordinance.
as far as the railing or whatever is going to, you know, outline the perimeter, what type of railing are you looking at?
Well, in Conshohocken,
Mark Hemsher, how are you? We can bring in floor samples, 3 different floor samples. They're all fire tested, rated. The sales, actually, for the coverage are way more important than the heat because we won't be open, you know, we're going to be open June, July, August, September.
No, I
And
was
so-
looking at
You're talking about the railing.
the
And
railing.
And the railing, we'll bring in samples, we'll bring in flooring
No, 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 no.
samples, we'll bring
We
in,
have to put it in the ordinance, though. It doesn't really.
right,
so
but we'll
it can't
bring,
be-
but we'll bring all the samples in
Yeah,
for railings and all that, you know, I'm saying we'll bring them.
But is it a solid, is it a rail, is it set back? Does it go
We
right
have a
to?
rail in Conshohocken right now.
Okay. Is
Yep.
it set back from,
It's right inside the parapet wall. Okay? So, but we could, you know, we'll bring in pictures and samples of different rails.
How far inside so that people don't sit up on the parapet?
Yes, it's about 6 inches inside.
I'm also thinking, you know, that if anything, you know, fell off, you know, would it fall to the street or is it sufficiently, you know,
The
set
parapet
back?
wall is probably 16 inches. And we serve all plastic cups, there's no glasses, no bottles up there. So,
Here is the railing, I assume. This railing here?
Yes.
Sarge?
Yeah. And it also shows the lighting pointing in.
Right.
I have a couple of questions in passing. The existing outdoor ordinance talks about a limitation of 25% of the interior can be exterior,
Right.
and you're proposing 100%.
Yes.
And then the existing ordinance talks about cutting off outdoor dining at 10 PM, and you're proposing midnight.
Correct.
Which I think is a little dicey, the midnight part.
There's a couple reasons for that. One, the outdoor dining, basically, for the most part, you're talking about township right-of-way. It's on the sidewalks. And so I believe that's why some of the limitations are on it. As for the roof deck, as to number of seats, it's an expensive proposition. No one would ever do it if you're going to limit it to 25% of your current seating downstairs because of the expense involved in fortifying the building itself for the roof deck. It just wouldn't be done by anybody. It would be an ordinance that would just be on the books and never used.
But you almost can't do 100% because you have to put mechanicals, still have to be on the roof, and exhaust fans still have to go somewhere. and
Right,
et
you have to
cetera.
be someone less. Township suggested we put some limitation, and so that was a limitation kind of we came up with, although you're absolutely right, it's going to be less than 100% anyway.
Just going back to the issue of parking, and you would have valet, would that be for the restaurant itself, or just for people who dine on the roof?
No, it would be open for anyone. Yeah, it wouldn't just be limited.
Okay.
Because I don't think we would, if there was no room downstairs or no room upstairs, we're not going to say, well, we got to check and see, what's available. They would be able to use it no matter what. Actually, they do have valet on occasion, I know, at the Great American Pub already for 2 years now. You'll see right on West Avenue there, that little area at the end of the building.
Question regarding music. My personal feeling is, especially if it's anticipated that more than one outfit on Wayne is going to be doing something like this, is that there be no music. I can just see too much noise. We have the light pollution, now the noise pollution, plus cars running up and down Wayne Avenue. My personal feeling is that you don't need any music.
I believe we provided in the ordinance no live music, and the only music, the pipe music, I believe in Conshohocken now, it's really background music, and I believe there's a limitation.
Well, you're 40 feet in the air there. I don't think that's comparing apples and oranges, I think, versus where the average height of one of the buildings that might, or any of the buildings that would be used for this, arguably, would not be nearly as high in the air as, unless somebody puts a restaurant in the old Opera House, which isn't going to work because there's no restaurant down
We
below.
would probably do the same thing. There's a restrictor amplifier that if somebody went up and tried to turn it all the way up, it will only go to a certain decibel.
Okay.
And we can at least talk about the decibel level that would
Yeah,
be.
I think that's worth it then, under the circumstances. Okay.
I'll leave this up to the building official, but the stairs are a means of egress. Don't they have to be protected?
You gotta come up with
Sorry. They can be protected by, as long as it's kept clean, it can be an open stairs. I mean, if the building local ordinances were required a covering, we can always do some sort of an awning type of car covering. But I don't think it's necessary, but we could do that as well.
They're going to look worse with a covering on them, won't they?
Well, actually, the whole idea of the exterior stairs, I think, is quite clumsy, and it's going to be a difficult thing to integrate with these buildings, so, and make it look attractive, and I'll leave that up to your skill. But you should check the ratings, that stair is a means of egress. So once you enter that stair, you have to be protected. So there's no way fire can be coming from underneath or in any direction.
I will check with township code officials.
Yeah,
on that.
if you could look at that.
Also, Nick, on, I forget which item this is. It looks like 7F, no rooftop dining within 100 feet of the property line of, and it just specifies single-family or two-family detached or semi-detached dwelling units. Now,
I think I just used language that's in the code. We can
okay,
make it
because
any-
there are some places where there's apartments that I
Yeah, there-
think,
so we couldn't, you don't want to, there are some places in Wayne that have apartments.
right, in condos
Yeah,
and
right.
whatnot.
So you don't want to prohibit it from being, if someone decides they want an apartment on top of a store, like you'll see in Wayne, there's apartments on top of stores. I don't think there are any actually on North Wayne Avenue, but I think on Lancaster Avenue, there's some apartments on top of stores.
Yes.
So actually, on North Wayne or on Lancaster Avenue, at least on the south side of Lancaster Avenue, I don't believe you'd be able to do this because you do have residences within 100 feet of it. It really, even though the ordinance doesn't just say north side of Lancaster, in effect, it really is the north side of Lancaster. So you're talking about the area, the north side of Lancaster, that's kind of buffered by Lancaster Avenue and the train tracks.
Yeah, but there has to be a restaurant before you can do the rooftop.
Yes, correct.
So
There-
if there's just an office building, you can't put a rooftop dining in. You have to have a restaurant pre-existing in that location before you can do that. I think that's what it said.
Right.
So, the other stuff is all,
Yeah, we understood the issue regarding residential areas, and we try to protect it as best we could in consideration of keeping in line with what the WBOD is trying to represent.
Nick, I know there are some apartments above stores directly across the street on North Wayne. Like, there's a dentist's office, and,
Oh, he does have an apartment there.
yeah,
You're
and
right.
there's several others.
Yeah.
I don't know whether
Yeah,
that's within 100 feet.
At least I know the residents of that apartment will be very happy to have rooftop dining. But, and actually, I think the owner of the building would also, so. That's about the only one I can think of, though, actually, is Joe Ritz's dental office, the only one that has an apartment on top of it. Yeah.
Any comments, any other comments from?
How do you deal with wind issues on rooftop decks in general?
The shade sails are 80 mile an hour. That's the only difficulty we have. If it gets too windy, people just go off. They just leave.
Well, I'm thinking more of like tables and chairs and,
They're aluminum. In Conshohocken, we're pretty high. There hasn't been a problem yet. They will blow a little bit, but nothing will pick up. We haven't had any incidents yet. Tables are made out of granite at the top, so they're not going anywhere.
I think also, remember, this does all have to be approved by the township as well. There's a provision in here that has to go through the permitting process and be approved by Department of Community Development.
In general, I like this idea a lot, and I especially like the truth of it is that the owners of this establishment keep one of the finest, neatest, cleanest. I mean, they're power washing the sidewalks every morning when I go to the train. So I think when they say they would have a facility that was, clean and safe, I take their word for that. So I like the idea of something off the sidewalks, frankly. Like some of the sidewalk dining in Wayne is pretty tight. So this I think gives people an option. So aside from like some detail work on the ordinance to make it exactly what everyone wants, I like the idea.
I would think, and I'm not sure how to do this, Mary, to incorporate all the issues that we have and potentially come back next month or, to go over them, to make sure that you understand where our concerns are and it's actually in writing and that we're talking midnight and not 12 p.m. All right, and I think that way, I'm sure you wrote it down. If not, they're in the minutes or someone has
Yeah, I
completed
copied
everything that
down
we've
everyone's
talked about,
comments.
all our concerns.
I'm taking notes, and Nick and I can meet, but here's a list of things, and maybe if there's comments that you want to make at this point, it would be helpful when Nick and I get together. we talked about, you don't want to limit the number of seats to 25%, but what is the number of seats you anticipate having so that we can put a maximum number of seats?
Well, again, remember, it's for everyone. And right now, we're saying 100, I believe right now they have 125 below. So that's kind of where it is, whether, I don't know if they can get 125 up there. When, remember, not only you have to deal with township codes, but also fire codes and things by the International Building Code that you need so much aisle width and spacing and things of that nature also. And the township actually.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't know that you can use a percentage of your inside seating for your outside. I think it needs to be more in line with parking regulations and the space that you actually have on the roof that can be utilized for restaurant. Like you said, you're going to take up space for the bar, you're going to take up space for your busing areas, you got to take up space for your restrooms. You may not, you may not get 40%, you may not get 50%, whatever it is, but I think you have to be regulated by the actual space that you have on rooftop dining minus all, ancillary things that you need to have in a food service operation. I think that has to be the number.
Mr. Falcone, so that's what we addressed with the applicant. The number of rooftop dining seats shall only be as permitted by applicable state and municipal health, accessibility, fire, and building code regulations, but in no event more than the number of indoor seats in the principal restaurant use. So those are things that we tried to work out with them. And as Mr. Cornelius said and you said, really it's going to be limited by the space they have. The architect's going to say, these are the tables you can have, here's your minimum aisle width for accessibility, the 5-foot loop for a restroom, all those good things really is what came into play.
Right. I don't think a percentage number.
Right, as opposed to a percentage number.
Right.
It's what can the rooftop sustain legally by all those codes, and it won't be more than what's indoor.
And also, as you see in most buildings, it says the maximum number of occupancy is a number, and that number is computed by the township relative to space, and that number needs to be adhered to.
On those codes.
Yes.
And just while we're talking, on the inclement weather, that's also item 13. All merchandise, goods, articles, equipment shall be adequately secured to ensure safety to persons and property during times. So we're telling them, when these come up, we're not going to tell you what to do. We're telling you, you have to address it. So we didn't want to make it, the more specific we come down to, then there's situations where it could come outside of that. So we're saying, okay, applicant, when inclement weather is coming, do what you need to do to make it safe.
And again, I think that all of us are talking more on not necessarily this specific location, this restaurant, but if we're going to add it to the ordinance, we have a chance to make it so that 3 years from now, a group of people aren't sitting up here and saying, what were they thinking? And I think that's what we want to do. We want to make it so that it's going to be doable and amenable to both the township as well as to the potential business owner in the future.
Charlie, to your point about replicating what's downstairs, upstairs, they don't have to replicate the kitchen or the cold storage, so maybe they do get pretty close to what they have on the first floor.
The thing, there's a whole, in the food service industry, there's a whole different outlook as to what takes place on the floor as to what takes place in the back of the house. The back of the house can take care of 500 people, and that's what it's set up for. It's not going to use those same kind of things because of, the cooking utensils, the washers and the storage and so forth. So that's a different computation relative to food service.
I just meant that you're not going to need that square footage for another kitchen and another big walk-in refrigerator on the roof.
Yeah, but those, occupancy that's not computed in occupancy.
I meant that the first floor already is restricted in terms of what it can take because of the refrigeration and the kitchen. So those things won't be present on the roof, and probably that means that they can get close to the seats they have on the first floor, or closer than you think.
Well, time will tell.
Yeah, if I could just interject, before I saw this memo that came out from Kevin, I had done some research to try and find some numbers. And I did see some other municipalities in the country that had limited to 50% or something. You know, you couldn't take it to 100% maximum. And that's what I think. You would be talking about 100% maximum if you said you could take it to the limit for indoor seating. You also have to take into consideration there's some outdoor seating at some of these. So does it include that outdoor seating, or is it just limited to the indoor seating? So those are things that you might want to consider.
So along those lines, I had another question. Some of the comments that we had from Mr. Norsini recommending that bar service not be allowed, but only table service for alcohol. Your plan allows for a bar up there, so that's one thing. But just going to the general ordinance itself, what would stop someone from just having a giant bar with one table and just basically having a giant rooftop bar? If you're going to allow it, should it be, restricted or limited?
Probably could limit the bar to percentage number of seats or whatever. Yeah, I know, but you are. They're not just looking at the Great American Pub, they're looking at everybody else too. I think, there's probably a way to do that, I would think, by
Yes,
percent,
I mean,
yeah.
yours is small and it's in the center of
Yeah.
the roof, but what if someone had a large one and it's on the edge of the roof?
I get it.
And it'd look more like spring break and 100 people leaning over the railing.
We can limit it by the percentage of seats at the bar cannot exceed so many. Yeah, I think that's probably the way to do it.
Take his concept and limit its location to central, so that they can't marry central, the bar cannot be on a peripheral. It needs to be centrally located within the area, which would count, pretty much keep the people off the side.
So another question with the bar, I know you have TVs downstairs, but I can't recall, do you have sound on those or no sound? And you have sound. So, we were talking live or, recorded music before. I would assume if you're going to have a bar up on the roof that you might likely have a TV up there. And if you do have a TV up there, then it's not the, the background music, but it's potentially the game.
Right.
So do you have thoughts on the noise, the
We can
noise
do
levels for
decibel
that?
level on that too. I noticed they said they have sound on their TV sets. The sound's never on their TV sets. Because you have a game on and people are talking and, so it's just kind of, yeah. But yeah, we can, do that too.
Going back to the list of the things that we're probably going to talk about, you had mentioned no food prep or open flames upstairs, no heaters on the roof, elevators and restaurants being located toward the rear of the building, no smoking on the rooftop. We're going to have some discussion on the exterior stairs and how to make them both safe and attractive. I'll get to that in a second.
Just to go back to the heat issue, I think they make those, should be able to put electric heat if they need it. They have those kind of stands that some of them they're by propane and some of them by electric. I think you need some kind of heat up there. In March, I just don't, maybe you can't have propane kind of heat, although they're pretty safe now, I think.
No propane heat or any heat with an open flame?
Right, okay, but they could use electric. Don't they, Steve, make those, they look like they're propane, but they're electric? Is that what you have, electric in Conchi? Yeah. Right, okay.
So were you
I think
going
you need some kind of heat.
When they get cold, they'll go
So were you going to
downstairs.
write out, prohibit ovens from being used? I think their plan called for ovens to be used on the roof. Is that right?
They could use electric ovens. Why do you make a face?
No. I'm just curious.
I mean, yeah, they make, you have microwaves that are electric.
Yeah.
You got, electric ovens, which
That's why I'm saying,
A lot
do
of places
you,
don't have any heat, any gas, so they have to use.
so do you want to prohibit food preparation altogether, or?
I think, well, I kind of say yes, prohibit food preparation on the roof.
I definitely would want that.
I'm in that boat.
And that's a note that I had taken from your discussion earlier, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's just my personal opinion. They can prep it downstairs, and there's heaters that they can keep it. There's
Is there a
electric
reason
box.
for prohibiting it?
I'm sorry?
Is there a reason?
I just think it's a potential fire hazard and a safety hazard. That's just my personal opinion. I mean, I'm only one vote, so.
Well,
No, no, no,
I
I'm
think
just-
if you're going to prepare food on the rooftop deck, you have to have a complete certified kitchen. You can't, I don't want people doing it on walks, you know, and so, and plus this is, we're not just talking about one issue, one establishment here, we're talking about the precedent, so I'm not liking food prep up there at all. Mary, what I thought though was that we ought to have a discussion point about the franchise, as ludicrous as it sounds, the franchise idea about, you know, if in an establishment like the Great American Pub, I know they're not going to franchise out the rooftop deck, but I don't want that in the, I wouldn't want that in our code, that, you know, that possibility.
Matt, you mean sort of like no sublet?
Yes.
It's not necessarily franchise per se, but, okay.
Saying is that the operation of the rooftop must be the operator of the downstairs restaurant. Must be one and the same.
No outsourcing.
Right. Well, that kind of takes care of it. That whoever owns or operates the restaurant needs.
Yeah, that's what we
The only
wrote
one that can
down.
operate the rooftop bar.
Limit on the number of dining seats versus bar seats. Bar must be in the center. In addition to the things listed in the ordinance, secure the furniture and umbrellas or wind sails from, tether them. The restrictor on the amplifier on both TVs and music so that it can't exceed the code noise regulations. And then, this is to throw out different ideas, and I'm not recommending this or suggesting this, but would you be interested in establishing a maximum number of rooftop facilities in the town center district, or a distance between the facilities so that it doesn't turn into Broadway in Nashville? Because you know it will.
Is that enforceable? I mean, if somebody can meet all the criteria here, and the one thing they can't meet is somebody beat them to the line first, is that?
There's ordinances that have been like vetted carefully that have a limit on the number of, say, apartments that you can have in a business center district, or the number of different kind of facilities. And you can't have a distance requirement on group homes, but this isn't afforded the same level of protection as, say, a group home would be. So yeah, I think you could have distance separations if that's something you were interested in. But it might not be anything that interests you.
Well, there's separation under the law with liquor licenses anyway. You can't have, unless they agree, you can't have one after another.
There goes our Nashville hopes.
Yeah, the student housing's another one.
Well, I think
other
it's
item is
it's an intriguing idea, but I think we have to do a little research first to see just what is the
It can-
potential number before.
Well, what's going to limit
before we
that
put a limit
is,
on things.
what's going to limit that, and we had discussed this again with staff, is basically it will be first come, first serve. What will be the limiting factor is the parking. So everybody can have the valet parking, but once the required spaces in the Bellevue and the South Wayne lot are taken up, that's going to effectively limit how many establishments can be there.
Steve, approximately how wide is each lot in the Wayne overlay? Is there 100 feet more, less?
I'm sorry, how wide are the spots?
The lots. How wide are the lots? In other words,
Oh.
can we say there cannot be two adjacent rooftop dining?
I don't know the width of the lots. If you walk down the street and you see the Tiger Shop and all those places, they're pretty
Yeah, they're
narrow
big.
lots.
I mean, if you want to limit it, maybe you say you can't have 2 adjacent rooftop dinings.
Yeah, I hate to, and again, obviously I'm here for the pub, but I hate to limit the number or limit the distance, because just thinking about North Wayne Avenue, that's where these would be located. And there's a number, someone already mentioned Arday, someone mentioned Matador, someone mentioned maybe Christopher's. I don't know if Teresa's is flat or not. I'm not certain what their rooftop is like. Goat's Beard.
You have
You
to
hate
there's
to
also
pull them
the
out.
other buildings that aren't restaurants now, that
Yeah.
could become a restaurant, conceivably, with that. Like I
Yeah,
say,
I think the idea that it is somewhat, as you just described, self-limiting because of the availability of parking may be the best solution. Unless,
And that is a first come, first served, basically, on that one.
And then the final, from me, suggestion is that each application should probably be reviewed by both the fire marshal and the police chief to address service issue, or safety issues from both emergency service providers.
Wouldn't we have a parking issue if, like Tiger Shop became a restaurant and the office building or the Kids in Cribs or whatever became a restaurant? I mean, we'd run out of parking without a rooftop issue.
but like I say, we did look at what will be the limiting factor, and we actually discussed it with our planning solicitor's colleague, and the limit's going to be, when does that that parking that you're valeting to get taken up? It is first come, first serve. It might be in smaller chunks or larger chunks, but at one point, that's going to be it. There's not any more. So
Steve, do you have a record of how many of these spots are, quote, purchased for valet or offset or whatever it is?
do not.
Do not.
If you bring up Google Earth, just about all those places have flat roofs.
Flat.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is you're not going to be able to have all of North Wayne Avenue with rooftop dining, because the parking will expire, will be used before that occurs.
It's an expensive proposition, too. It's not, let's just put some seats up on the roof.
A lot of this is going to be limited by, like you said, Teresa's. I mean, they don't have access to, they'd have to build stairs inside their building. This is convenient because they're putting them outside the building, so they're not eating up their floor space. But for many of those buildings, that's really not possible, or unless they want to give up floor area, of course, but.
Yeah, the pub actually has an advantage because that area now where the outdoor dining is actually owned by them. It's not.
Yeah.
It's
So
not a
when you,
right-of-way.
when you first got up and presented, you said, we have our structural engineers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really kind of the first report everyone has to do, is
Right.
because of the capacity of the roof is,
Yeah, the engineer.
And that's my stuff.
You want to?
Yeah, let me just see.
Okay,
what we got.
read that.
Oh, yeah, there's a letter. I'll read it into the record. This is from Structural Labs Engineering, Stephen Labrolia, PE. Per your request, we reviewed the feasibility of adding a new roof deck on top of the existing structure. Based on our review, we believe this addition of a roof deck can be safely achieved with some structural modifications to the existing building. Once the project begins, we'll provide further structural drawings, document the required modification to achieve this design if you need any further information. As we mentioned, we have to go through the whole permitting process of the township anyway, and obviously they're going to be very concerned about the whole structural integrity of the building itself. So this is the first thing they did, obviously, before even getting here. They needed to see how much is it going to cost them, and is it even feasible to do?
but my recollection is it's a 100-pound live load for assembly areas. So if he's checked it for that, that's great. Can I see your plan one more time? So your stair on the front is on the property line? Where is the property line on this plan?
Yeah,
This point right here, this line, that corner of the building.
It doesn't continue out?
I'm going to have to look. Well, one thing here, I know from a zoning standpoint, I'll have to look, one, what the WBOD regulations are. Remember, basically, you have everything connected, or a lot of these buildings are already connected. And I know that if this is an existing nonconformity, you can extend an existing nonconformity without.
There's a property line along that edge?
Yeah. Oh, this is the alley here?
It's a little 4 or 5 foot alley,
Okay,
but it's connected to the building next to it, the Suburban,
right.
in the back.
So I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention, but while I was checking the IBC, and you have to look at that stair, it can't be an open stair on the property line.
Okay. As we said, they'd have to comply with everything. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lure, we couldn't hear you.
I forgot to. Any other comments from the Planning Commission? Any other comments, observations from staff?
No, sir.
Okay, well, we had a lot of great ideas here. Nick, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, whatever you want to do, but, certainly, I think Mary and I can come back and do another redraft. And, if we can place it on the agenda for next month.
It's my feeling that we really don't need the vote. That would accidentally exclude ideas that maybe not everybody agrees with, but are still great ideas. So why don't we just let it go as it is right now? Is that agreeable to everybody?
That's
Okay.
fine. I didn't want to give you the impression I was opposed to it. Actually, I like the idea, but I think the more you can use it and more lively the downtown is, the better.
And that's our intent, too. The concern is we need something to refresh.
And can it be placed on the agenda for July?
It's already on the agenda, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience and your comments.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, there's no public comment, and I don't think is there any old business? No new business? Then I guess we can adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Any second.
All in favor? Okay.
Aye.
Fine.